Plato, Socrates, and Christianity are weakness? Are morality being used as an excuse? Are value judgments on life unhealthy? Nietzsche's views are certainly profound and interesting, but especially radical. And Twilight of the Idols is no different from any of his other work, as it's kind of a mix and combination of all his previous works. And if you are familiar with his work, you will definitely find this one very interesting. So let's look at hollow beliefs and what values have caused society to decay. However, before we do get into that, at the end, I do cover probably my favorite part of the book and something I found very beautiful about it. And that probably separates it, at least for me, from all his other works. So stick around until the end to see that.
It's Monday, cocksuckers.
Twilight of the Idols was first published in 1889, and it was subsequently opened to not many sales, just like a lot of his other books. But Nietzsche never saw the result, as he mentally collapsed and he went totally mad. And Twilight of the Idols was released weeks after his mental collapse, and it was his second to last work that he wrote. It was finished within a week, and it was meant to be a summary of his beliefs. And the original title, interesting enough, was, or at least in the manuscript, was Idle Hours of a Psychologist. But the name never left the manuscript, and instead, a German word that I'm probably going to butcher, Guten Dämmerwoch. It was a play on words of Wagner's opera Guten Dämmerwoch, which is Twilight of the Gods, which follows the downfall of the gods by greed and betrayal. And semi-parallel to the opera, Nietzsche opens with a war against idols. And he is taking a hammer with him, but not to destroy and to dismantle, as his wording sounds when he says he's, starting a war with idols. But the hammer is more of a tool to tinker, to test if idols are hollow. Now, what he means by the idols he's going to test is that certain things our Western society puts above most other things. Things that the Western society holds as dearest. Its dogma, its values, its thoughts. Christianity, rationalism, Platoism, etc. Things of that nature. And Nietzsche aims to assess them to see if they are worth keeping or worth throwing out. Of course, he's going with the latter, as most of these he has tackled in his later works. But he kind of changes his perspective and looks at them from different angles. And he's mainly looking at them through the lens of they are causing decay and what we can do to rid of them. He believes these idols are causing decay, or what he commonly refers to in the words he uses as decadence. These old truths, these old dogmas are causing us to lose our sense of beauty and strength. And he goes on this almost literary trial of fire, first starting with the largest and probably the most important to Western civilization, the idol of God, or more specifically, the Christian God.
It's Jesus!
Don't hoard your treasure down here where it gets eaten by moths and corroded by rust, or worse, stolen by burglars. Stockpile treasure in heaven where it's safe from moth and rust and burglars. It's obvious, isn't it? The place where your treasure is the place you will most want to be and end up being. To Nietzsche, what he would probably say to this verse, and probably what he said when he read it, is this is utter nonsense. As he believes whether you focus on a certain type of fictional world or a heavenly world or what most would think of as a higher world, he considers weakness. The reason Nietzsche stresses this is because he believes if we focus on a higher world or a fictional world, that we end up missing what is most beautiful around us. Whether it's nature or things that are worth experiencing, but we commonly miss because we are constantly stuck in a fictional world or an imaginary one. We miss what is real for what is non-existent, but it is much more than that. The question to Nietzsche is really what causes most of us to miss the actual world. Why do we look to a higher world? And he believes it is a symptom of weakness. He believes it is a symptom of someone who cannot face reality, truth, or what he likes to term, or what he called it as, the real and apparent world. And I believe it connects with a quote from Beyond Good and Evil, one of my personal favorites. The strength of a man's spirit will then be measured by how much truth he can tolerate. This rooted weakness is the cause of people not seeing the very simple but yet very remarkable things that makes life so precious and beautiful. The birds, the rising sun, a good breakfast, things of that nature. Of course, the solution to this idol has been weaved in, but to remind you, it is to face what is true, what is in front of you, and to accept a life and not look towards a higher one. So don't store your treasures in heaven, but enjoy the ones you have now. If thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. One of Nietzsche's greatest and I believe most profound criticisms against Christianity, instead of dealing with emotions like lust, anger, pride, aka sinful emotions, you are to remove them. And he uses the example of a dentist. It's kind of like if you had a toothache, the dentist would just go ahead and right out and just rip it out of your head. Just go ahead and deal with it then. Or example, it's like if you have a headache, basically just cutting off your head. And he blames this on the church's inability to capture the essence of life. It can't beautify these or create a man who can control such urges. It only knows how to deny them, not rectify them. It is a healthy person who doesn't have to destroy his instincts, but he can control them. He's able to obtain true freedom. He's able to say no to his urges. He has the power to make a choice. And the main reason for the church's inability to capture the essence of life, Christianity's focus is on what is, and not instead of what Nietzsche calls what is becoming. What does that exactly mean? And isn't following old truths what is fundamental to most of Western culture, society, philosophy, and not just Christianity? Many philosophers like to put the world into systems, a way of thinking, ideas, things of that nature. And Nietzsche, as I've covered before, is definitely not like this. He's very fluid, and obviously you'll see why in a second. And usually these type of philosophers, they put something at the top of the system. And who is a better example of this than Plato, who of course his total idea to his whole system is the philosopher king. Someone who is balancing their soul, virtue, and lives a harmonious life with nature. But this is false, according to Nietzsche, and it is a bad aim for a society, as it presents the world as stagnant. And Nietzsche breaks it down perfectly. First, the idea of finding the perfect balance or highest aim is nonsense. It is a failure of vision. And philosophers, we'll say that, philosophers like Plato or Kant focus on what is and what is not becoming. They fail to understand that the essence of life is change, that the ideals of man and of characters are always moving forward. Life is not stuck in a system. It causes a lot of frustration. And their solution to this glaring flaw is to blame the body, blame the senses, and blame history, and ultimately reject the body, reject history, and reject the senses. It is a symptom of the weakness of the mind once again. It describes a person who says man ought to be this or that as a loafer, a moralist, a wretched bigot, and a person of extreme arrogance, as he knows what man ought to be. But most importantly, he sees someone who puts life into the systems, missing a play of many different characters, types, and thoughts. This is what, in essence, takes away from one's own perspective. However, there is something much more dangerous, and it comes in the way of harming one's own character. Something much more sinister. The fundamental institutional idols of the West, or weakness, as Nietzsche refers to them, doesn't just take away beauty or calls someone to judge life as stagnant. It takes the claws away from us. He uses the example of the Teutonic Knights. Before the church, the knights were men who were considered to be vigorous, bold. But after the monastery, they became sinners. Now, what does that mean? It means they became miserable. They were told they were sick, dirty, and not destined for heaven from the beginning. And aka the reason for this is because a sinner, or someone who is told they are sick, is a lot easier to control. Their claws were clipped, they were tamed, and once someone's value judgments are changed or lead down a path of fatalism and meaningless nihilism, they become a shell of what they formerly were. And how do we stop such a process? Well, let's take 3 steps back and let's look at the value judgments of our biggest idols. Firstly, Plato and Socrates. Nietzsche believes that they both believe that life is a disease, and specifically using the story of Socrates as drinking of the poison was his final act of cleansing himself of his disease or his life. Or let's look at the Christianity's view on life. People are born sinners, born dirty, and that only this life is temporary, and the life beyond is the one that is more important. Now, you probably understand why we're looking at these, but the purpose is to understand what a healthy value judgment on life is. We can find the worthless ones by looking at our idols, as the perspective of life being worthless is usually a sign of a declining life. Healthy life affirms life. Should we not follow views on life that are hollow and judge life to be worthless? Why so hard to the diamond once to the coal? Are we not next of kin? Why so soft, O my brethren? This is the question for you. For are ye not my brothers? Why so soft? Why so servile and yielding? Why are your hearts so fond of denial and self-denial? How is it that so little fate looketh out from your eyes? And if your hardness will not sparkle, cut and divide, how can ye hope one day to create with me? For all creators are hard, and must seem to you blessed to stamp your hand upon the millenniums as upon wax. Blessed to write upon the will of millenniums as upon brass, harder than brass, nobler than brass. Hard through and through is only the noblest, the new tablet of values. O my brethren, I said over your heads, become hard. Thus spake Zarathustra. As I've read the final portion of this book, The Hammer Speaketh, I wanted to cover something a little bit different. I wanted to mainly reflect on the book. I believe this is one of the most interesting and funny works I've read from Nietzsche, and it was very entertaining. I loved the section from where he just went on and insulted a ton of authors, calling their books trash. And I believe one of the books he said it was even repulsing to even hold it. I know his view of Plato, and I can't remember the quote of what he said. I know he said he was boring, but he said something after that. I'll probably put it right here. And I believe throughout this book, he tackles quite, complex things about society's values, but he does it in a kind of not so serious, but partly serious manner. If I could describe this book, opposed to his other ones, this is kind of like having a beer with Nietzsche. That's probably the only way I could describe it. It's kind of like a philosophical debate or talk at a bar. It's very beautiful, it's very fun, very jovial, and it shows that although you read certain text from Nietzsche, that in all, he is more of a joyful philosopher than most. Now, I did want to thank you about this. If you made it this far, as you may have disagreed with some of my takes or some of the ways I formed it, but I did want to make kind of a unconventional type of unconventional flow to it, as I didn't cover it section by section. I kind of grouped these sections together. And yes, I do recommend you read it. It's a very short read, but there will be more to come. And if you want a sneak peek into the next video, I'll probably do Fear and Trembling. As recently, I've been kind of going back and forth between each worldview or different and opposing views. As you know, Kierkegaard is more of he's a Lutheran, he's a Christian, and I was reading Nietzsche at the same time, just to kind of counterbalance them and get a more holistic view of what I was reading. But yes, I will do Fear and Trembling next, and I have something quite special for that one indeed. Now, you may think, oh, what is he going to do? Well, I'm just getting better editing software or hardware. And for most of the time, I've been editing off of a iPad, so that's why most of my edits are kind of simple, as I don't have full tools. But I am getting a MacBook, and soon the quality of these will improve. My writing is getting better. Hopefully it's getting better. You might have watched all my videos and just said, "Nah, this is all shit." But I'll forgive you for it, as I am constantly getting better with this stuff. But nevertheless, thank you. And I will see you in the next one, hopefully.